everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the ANR Design Unholstered podcast. This is episode 20. We have Dave from DC Precision. He's the owner and operator, and he does quite a bit of cool gunsmithing, porting, and he's got a bunch of other accessories and stuff on his website that you can purchase. But I'll let Dave introduce himself, talk about what DC Precision is all about.
Yeah, hey, how's it going? David Petta. Like Alex said, I'm the owner of DC Precision. Had the shop going for like 4 years now. Kind of stumbled my way into starting my own business from a kind of long journey to get there. But yeah, as far as what the shop does, I kind of started out a little more focused on doing like Cerakote and stuff like that. That space was getting pretty crowded. And at the time I was starting to get more interested myself personally in like competition shooting and that kind of world, I guess, so to speak. And the business kind of followed suit and molded into kind of more specializing in competition firearms and that sort of stuff. I've always been a big fan of, well, actually, I shouldn't say I've always been a big fan of Glocks. I used to hate Glocks until I kind of really started learning, a lot more about pistols and firearms, and pistols specifically, and kind of realized, how capable the platform is. And even though they're super ugly, I think they can be really good looking guns once they're modified. But just a box stock Glock, I think, is about one of the ugliest pistols out there, which is kind of funny coming from a Glock guy. But got into the Glock stuff or the competition stuff, and then really started trying to kind of, Glocks are not the most ideal competition pistol, especially nowadays. There's a lot of other options out there, and so I kind of started really going down that road of trying to make them work in that kind of area. Which there's some things that are good about them. There's some things that are bad about them. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed. So
right,
and that's kind of led me to the point where I'm at now. So.
Cool. So you're in the business of making Glocks, not Glocks. So it's basically, so a buddy of mine, John Hollister, he always makes fun of me because I got into Glocks I went through a Glock phase, kind of out of that Glock phase. I went from like buying guns, customizing the fuck out of them to fit my needs, and then, almost tolerance stacking too much, and then reeling back and going, fuck, I just want factory guns that run. It's like cyclical, right? I'm going to go back into like a custom pistol phase at some point. But, I went down the path of, I got a compensator on one of my Glocks, and it doesn't really do much unless it's like I put my full auto sear into the back of it and let it rip or something like that. I've shot some cool comped pistols and chunk ported barreled pistols and stuff along the way, and no one's quite really done it like you. I was looking at your slide cuts and how what looks like a dwell time of sorts in your windows above the porting, so that it's not just blasting gases into the slide. It looks like there's a delay on where you start your cut on the barrel versus where the window ends.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it as far as the dwell time, because that's basically what it is. And I mean, if you go back and look at the original Glock 17C and 19C models, they have exactly that. The ports in the barrel are set back in the back of the ports in the slide itself, because the unlock time is so fast that the slide starts to unlock and come rearward before the pressure is completely dropped. And you can tell when you look at an old C model Glock, because all of the carbon deposits that make their way onto the slide, they're not perfectly lined up with the ports in the barrel when the slide's in battery. Right. They're actually set off in front of the ports. And when you stop and think about it, well, it's because the slide's coming out of battery. And so if you're porting in the slide is perfectly lined up, yeah, the majority of your gas is going to escape, and you're going to be okay. But, the way I look at it, I'm like, well, it could be done better. Glock did it this way for a reason. They have engineers that they paid a lot of money to and did a lot of time doing it. And, a manufacturer of their size, they're going to look at all of the liability, all of the long-term reliability, and they're going to try and do it to the best way possible. And I'm like, well, it'd be kind of dumb to ignore the way they did it, especially being that there's some common sense behind it. And so, yeah, it's exactly that. The window is longer than the port. And I've actually increased the size of my port recently to get a little more efficiency out of it. And because I was probably a little overzealous on the length of my window versus the length of my port, to make sure that I didn't get any of that blowback into the slide and frame and everything. But there is still a significant offset between the two. And you see that, some of the, when the ports are perfectly lined up, you'll see those guns get real dirty, on the inside of the slide, on the inside of the frame. The barrels are just, disgusting looking. They get pretty coated pretty fast. So
yeah, and that's you're adding a failure point there, like a reliability standpoint. Your gun is not going to be as reliable for as many rounds put through the gun in a configuration like that. Just blasting holes in the barrel and a little window that's real tight to those holes. You're just going to be filling that gun with carbon. It's going to add wear and tear and speed up the wearing process of the actual firearm, and ultimately make it less reliable long term, not maintaining the fire. I don't clean my guns. Like once every 5,000 rounds, I'll be like, ew, the inside of my high power looks like ass. Time to clean it, right? So I don't really fucking clean my guns. I know there's a lot of people out there when they first get into guns, every time they go to the range, they tear their gun down, clean it surgically, put it back together, function check it, and put it away. I know you're probably not like that either. You're
yeah, I've settled into a happy medium. And part of that comes from the way that I build my guns. My guns like to run a little cleaner and definitely a lot wetter than like a box stock lock will. But yeah, I'm definitely not the type that, like, I'm not taking a dental pick to the crown on my muzzle, to get all the carbon and shit out of there. Because you learn well after the fact that that's not actually good for it. But B, because it's just, they don't need to be spotless. So I mean, when I'm cleaning my guns, I'll just do I'll do a real simple, just wipe down and re-oil. I'm not, busting out the Q-tips and the solvents and, letting the copper cutter soak through the barrel and all that. It's one swab out with a bore snake, knock all the major carbon off, a little oil, and we're good to go again.
Yeah.
So I'm in the middle probably. So I won't let it go 5,000 rounds between doing that, but I mean, there's guns that are you can do that with, and it's not a problem.
Yeah,
so.
And I lubricate within 5,000 rounds. I lubricate every 1,500 or so, but it's and one of the things is people don't realize how glorious it is to clean a gun with air, like an air compressor, and blow guns out. It's just like toothbrush, breakthrough clean, scrub, blow that bitch out, add lube, and it's done in like 4 minutes. The people that bust out a box of fucking Q-tips and are trying to get every little spot, you're like, you're fucking crazy. Just even like canned air will do more better that fat,
No, I got 110 psi coming out of an air gun. That's one of the easiest ways to clean. Just blow that shit out.
Exactly.
So. Or if all else fails, a can of fucking brake cleaner. It works too. So
yeah,
depending on what kind of finish you have on your firearm.
Right. So your ports, it's safe to call it a chunk port, right? Is that like the type of porting? What do you call the porting of that barrel?
I think chunk port is kind of, I don't know if that's trademark necessarily, but that's Vinny's thing.
Who's Vinny?
From oh my god, why am I blanking on this right now? Man, I'm gonna have to come back. I got like COVID brain. I just totally like lose names and things nowadays.
I get it.
Oh my god. Yeah,
Don't worry about
it'll
it. Okay,
it'll
let's
hit
not
me
call
in a
it
minute
chunk
here,
porting, but it's a very simple port, cuts through the barrel.
Yeah, correct.
So there's a lot of misconceptions about that style of porting. People don't buy or get that done to their guns because they think that the copper jacket's going to separate and you're going to get like actual copper peeling out of their porting, and that's simply not true.
No, I mean, if you've got some really jankety, jaggedy ass cut in the barrel that has uneven spots or high or low spots in it or something like that, or has hasn't been deburred properly, then yeah, absolutely, you could shed some jacketing and stuff like that. But a properly cut port that's been deburred, cleaned out thoroughly, shouldn't cause you any issues like that. I mean, obviously, I always recommend, like, hey, definitely go test the ammo that you're using, because certain brands of bullets work better with certain styles of barrels and things like that, and ports and compensators, etc. And especially, go into like the Brian Enos forum and go start looking at different, go look for threads on 9mm major loads, and you'll see guys talking about, well, X brand of bullets, I started getting major jacket separation, but it was less of a port problem than it was a velocity problem, because you're pushing a 9mm bullet, up to, 1400 feet per second and faster, speeds that the bullet wasn't necessarily designed to go to, because guys are trying to reach 9 major pressures. So, but yeah, as far as regular porting with a defensive round or a range round or something like that most people are going to be using, no, you're not going to have any issues from it. And I mean, the easiest way to tell if you're doubting that is just go put out a blank piece of paper downrange, go shoot some rounds through it at varying distances, and you can see what the bullet's doing. If the bullet's tumbling, you're going to see it. If the bullet has jacket separation, you're going to see holes around the bullet hole from pieces of jacket that are coming off and shrapneling the paper, But if you've got a nice clean circular hole, then you know that nothing's going on with the bullet. So
you mentioned reaching major pressure speeds, stuff like that. For people listening, so David's got a background in it sounds like USPSA or
yeah.
So you're shooting USPSA. I've done a couple local matches, right? I shoot PRS. So when people ask like, oh, what scope do I put on my 300 Win Mag? I'm like, what do you want to do with it? Are you going to shoot an animal? You're going to go shoot PRS, and when it comes down to bullets, like what ammo should I run? It's like, well, what barrel? Have you tried different barrels? Have you tried different ammo? It's like everyone just wants like those recipes. And obviously those recipes exist on the internet if you search for it. They absolutely do exist. So when you're talking about achieving majors, that's so people that are listening, just explain to them what that means, that they're loading their ammo so that it runs hotter, so that it's scored a certain way for USPSA.
Yeah, correct. So USPSA has what they call hit factor scoring, and hit factor is partially determined by your power factor. And power factor kind of originally came about because you had guys, if you're shooting a 45 ACP handgun versus a guy that's shooting a 9mm handgun, it was basically designed as a handicap to even the playing field, so that competitively, if I'm shooting a gun that has a lot more recoil and is harder to shoot quickly with follow-up shots, I'm given a handicap so that I'm evened out with the guy that's shooting the easier to shoot gun. And it's kind of morphed since then. I think it's kind of a moot thing now. I think it probably should be taken away. But basically what it is now you have guys that are shooting in open division, and open division, you're not competitive unless you're shooting a handgun that is scored at major power factor. So a lot of guys, because of capacity, they're shooting 9mm to get as much capacity as they can in the same size of magazine, same length of magazine. And so they're loading 9mm to, we call it major pressure because it scores as major power factor. And the power factor is basically, it's just a calculation of the weight of the bullet. And there's a calculation for the weight of the bullet versus the velocity of the bullet. And that's how you get your power factor. So what you end up with is, like, I shoot a 124 grain bullet and it's going, 124 grain bullet going 1400 feet per second, out of a standard 9mm. So that's cooking. So
right. And these guys running open guns, some of the guys are running some serious guns, extra long slide ports, the little charging handles on the side, and
oh yeah,
there's velocity, and they're getting all those pressures, and then their compensators that are built in are doing their job. So you have these tricked out guns that are running a high pressure 9, but the gun itself is kind of counteracting, the recoil impulse from the higher pressure. So they're hitting that major power factor, and then they're shooting really quick and really well. And it becomes that very competitive element All right. Some of the guns I shoot with shoot major.
Yeah, it's a full system. I mean, the cartridge, the gun is designed around the cartridge. And so you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, well, damn, he's shooting 124 grain 9mm going 1400 feet per second. You're like, that thing must kick like a freaking mule. But actually, those guns shoot softer than your typical Glock with a 147 grain 900 foot per second subsonic load. That you're like, oh, this thing shoots so soft with this. That open gun probably shoots softer and smoother than that gun does, because it's designed as a full system around that cartridge. Everything's in place for a reason. And it's really well thought out and well designed. So that's the thing. Talking about compensators, there's it's got to be a full system. Everything's got to be designed for that singular purpose. So
right. So we're talking, you have to know what loads are going to do what. So I started some buzz. Actually, before I talk about that, you talked about the original Glock barrels having the ports set farther back on the barrel. Now we know, let's call it, the moment is the chamber on the gun. I don't know, I'm going to do engineer talk, but the moment is where, your recoil impulse rolls the gun up and down. Let's call it at the chamber. Having your ports closer to the chamber, you're having less effective downward pressure from those ports. So yours are all the way at the front. I saw that you put your iron sights behind your front window. So you are trying to elongate that moment as long as possible, as far away from the tipping point as possible, to achieve the maximum effect of your barrel porting and your system as a whole. Versus the old, like I have like an S3F Solutions ported barrel on a 34. Well, the ports are fucking 1.5 inches from the chamber. It's a 5-inch barrel, right? It's like, what the fuck does that actually do? It's loud. Does it actually do much? Maybe a little bit, but measurable compared to your style of porting and windowing, it's pretty significant difference.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a few things there. I mean, for me, I'm also trying to think just from a purely, leverage standpoint. If I've got something further out here, I'm able to put more leverage on this pivot here with the same amount of force. I'm exerting more leverage than if I'm over here. And then the other thing about it is, if my ports are way back here at the chamber, then I'm bleeding pressure off. The second that bullet passes those ports, I'm bleeding pressure off. Right. So the earlier that those ports are in the barrel, the more pressure you're bleeding off, the more velocity you're bleeding off, versus if they're clear down at the end, you've gotten the majority of your powder burn. The bullets travel the majority of the way down the barrel. So it's almost out and free of that friction that's slowing it down. And so it's, you're going to get the best powder burn, most velocity, while still utilizing ports.
With the least amount of pressure drop behind the bullet. Yeah. So
right. Yeah.
Makes total sense.
Because that question pops up all the time. So, all the time I get guys that are asking, well, how much velocity loss am I going to get on a ported barrel versus a non-ported barrel?
Right.
And again, it's not that cookie cutter answer, because it's like, well, what barrel are you using? What load are you using? What barrel length are you using? Where's the port set in the barrel? There's a million other questions there. It's not so simple as like, you're going to get X number of feet per second drop every time. Well, that's not the case.
So the controversial question that I kind of brought up the other day is, I shot a Staccato XC video, and it's like, this gun's great. I personally wouldn't carry it concealed in a vehicle. I'm usually in a vehicle. If I'm gonna get into a gunfight, it's gonna be in a vehicle or in a confined space of sorts. And I have like a 586L Comp Smith & Wesson Performance Center. It's a Comp 357 revolver. And I've shot that from close retention, and it's like, holy fuck. And that's with double ear pro. Like, I wear Ops4 amps with the earbuds. iPro, and it's still like jarring. And like I'm shooting 124 standard loads, like federal 124 grain stuff out of this Staccato, and we're watching the videos and the light's hitting it perfectly, and you see all the carbon rainbow sprinkled down and all the gas is coming out of it, and that's a standard load. And I'm like, man, this sucks. This would suck if you had to shoot from a vehicle, all the windows are rolled up, shooting through auto glass, all that particulate going airborne and blowing around you because of all those gases escaping. And I said, I wouldn't carry this. I want a normal barrel if I'm going to conceal carry compared to this gun. And you got all the guys in the comments that are like, oh, be a man, pussy. And he's talking about shooting standard loads. Well, in a defensive gun, I'm carrying higher pressure loads. I'm usually carrying like a plus P defensive carry round. That does have a significant amount of pressure change than a standard load, more pressure behind it. So that's inherently going to create more pressure escaping from a ported barrel or a compensator or whatever. And yeah, I just thought it was kind of like, and Jay, do you know Jay from Pew Science? Have you ever seen any of his stuff for suppressors?
No, I've heard some really good things about his videos. I have yet to actually sit down and watch any of them. So
he created like essentially like a scoring system for suppressors.
Yeah,
and like whatever the better score is, the better the can is. But we talked a lot about the end user. Your hearing might be different from my hearing. Your reaction, your body's natural reaction to an immediate pressure change or noise might be different than someone else's. Like my wife is deaf, pretty much. Too many concerts, right? I shoot a lot. I wear good ear pro, but I also do upland bird hunting with my dog, and you can't wear ear pro when you're trying to hunt birds in deep cover. You won't hear them flush, right? And a shotgun at 28 inches with a low brass number 8 going 1175 or 1200, it's far enough away from me that it's not really impacting my ears that much. So everyone's different, right? And you know, someone might be able to shoot close retention with standard loads with a ported gun and be like, yeah, that was not a big deal. But someone else, it might actually have a significant impact on their fucking immediate bodily response to it. So you get these dudes who are, I shot for a fucking, it's like, this guy is like, I took a vehicle class, and yeah, bro, you're wearing ear pro, you're wearing eye pro, you're probably wearing a fucking mask if you're shooting through auto glass. Like, you're got PPE on. Try doing it with everything rolled up and do it again. You know, do it with your actual defensive loads and see how it, I mean, don't actually fucking do that. That's a horrible idea. But, you know, I just wanted to like get people thinking of other scenarios, and not everyone's the same and everyone's fucking different. So what is your opinion of that? Carrying a compensated or a ported gun?
You know, I've really kind of stepped back as far as like, I try not to get super wound up and that sort of stuff. I'm kind of, I'm like the live and let live guy now at this point, as far as like, man, if it works for you, if you go out and shoot with it and train with it and practice with it and you're comfortable with it, fucking by all means, go for it, you know? And if you're not comfortable with it and you think it's a stupid idea, then that's fine. Do what you think is good for you. You know what I mean? So like, I mean, me personally, for me, I wouldn't have a problem carrying a ported gun, you know, that I vetted well, that I know like, hey, you know, and for me, it's less about shooting from retention and debris and things like that as it is just purely reliability. And is the gun going to run when I want it to run? You know, because ported guns can be finicky. I mean, that's a thing. But like anything, if you know how they work and you know the reasons why, then you can address the reasons why. And that's the thing that drives me nuts, is how often you get people that are like, well, I heard this, so I would never do this. And it's like, okay, but do you know the reasons why? Do you know the reasons behind it? Well, no, I just heard it, so I took it as gospel. And now, you know, and now I'm going to go over and I'm going to preach it as gospel to these other people. It's like, well, you know, if you haven't personally experienced it, or you don't actually know all of the reasons behind why, then you're just spitting out more nonsense garbage that without any actual real data or reasoning behind it. You know what I mean? So like the guys, you know, like for you personally, you now personally have the real personal data of shooting your gun from close retention with a big ass port on it. And you're like, yeah, no, this doesn't work for me, because you have that firsthand knowledge. You know what I mean? But like we talked about earlier, when you were like, well, you know, you get all the people that are like, oh, you know, it's going to shed the jacket and do all this stuff. Well, do they actually know that, or did they just hear it and now they're just repeating? You know what I mean? So.
And I have a friend that had jacket separation on a compensated gun, and it ate his face from close retention in a vehicle and almost lost his eye. So
Nice.
I do have friends that it happened to them. Yep. I won't carry a ported gun because when I was doing close retention shooting in a vehicle in a class, I did have jacket separation with my setup, and it caused me to almost lose an eye and lose my vision. So I won't do that. So, you know, I hear both sides. I've experienced some of it, but do I really just want to blast my sinuses with all those changes of pressure all the time just to prove a point? Fuck no. Like, and like, I like that opinion too. Like, well, just let him live. Like, okay, make the decision for yourself. If you're comfortable with it, fucking do it. If you're not comfortable with it, don't fucking do it. I kind of pigeonholed myself on Instagram, at least, because I do these AMAs, like ask me a question, I video response it. And, you know, some days I do like 200 of them. And a lot of people come from my opinion. And I know that it's from my opinion. And I try to say, in my opinion, but, and this is not holy, this is just my experience. And it's tough, man, because you get so many polarizing views on the internet. But the whole point is trying to get people to think for themselves, actually do critical thinking, actually do the testing. 99% of the people that are going to listen to this podcast have probably never tried different loads in their pistol. They've never papered it. They've never actually grouped it to see what different loads do out of the actual carry guns that they have. They've never really done anything with their guns. And that's one thing. You shot USPSA and that you took it very seriously, or you do take it very seriously, and that's something that you enjoy the science and the process behind. I'm the same way with PRS. I love the science behind ballistics and what bullets do and what style of bullets I like to shoot. Like, I shoot 130 burgers. Like, that's my, like, I found a production ammo from Federal, their gold medal match stuff, that runs 3K out of my gun with a Burger 130 OTM that groups same hole at 100 yards and holds like quarter MOA all the way out to like 600 and still shooting like a 1-inch group, no wind at fucking 1,000. It just works. And why haven't I switched over to a lighter recoiled system? I kind of enjoy 6.5 Creed more. I like a little bit of a challenge while moving that gun around, whereas all these guys are shooting all the like 6K Tiger or fucking 6XC 6.5 by 47 Lapua, which I'm going to switch to. I'm going to switch to 6.5 by 47 Lapua because it's still available as a factory load that you can buy other places. But I'm finding
probably like $100 a box right now.
Yeah, it's not that expensive. It's pretty expensive. So I was shooting like the Federal stuff. It was like one dealer cost or RSR group was like 117 a round. It's like, now I can't find it at dealer price anywhere. And then I, go on Ammo Seek and it's like 327 a round. I'm like, fuck.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine that was asking me to help him find some 6.5 PRC, and it was the only places I could find it. It was literally like $99 for a 20-round box. I was like, that's fucking insane, man.
Yeah, I just switched to my hunting rifle over to a 6.5 by 300 Weatherby Win Mag. It's fucking $12 a shot.
Jeez.
But you're going to shoot it. I'm going to do like a 5-shot group. I'll do like a 2-shot to get on to 50. 3-shot group at 100. I'm not going to do a barrel break in because it's such a hot load, and it's a stainless steel cord barrel with a carbon fiber wrap that's actually under tension, and there's an air gap between the barrel and the carbon fiber. And then, so you don't really, it's such a good barrel, you don't really need to break it in. Just fucking shoot it, get your velocity, and in 10 years, when you kill enough animals with it and it starts to speed up a little bit, okay, cool, get your new muzzle velocity and clean it out. Yeah. But it's one of those where I'm just like, I have 3 boxes of ammo, and I'm like, this is going to last me the next 5 years for any big game hunt I go on. But that shit is absurd. It's fucking absurd. So one thing that I've talked to a few friends about, but and I've never really talked about it publicly, but I really fucking can't stand companies that make compensators or port barrels that put an employee or themselves in front of a fucking checkerboard, yellow and black checkerboard, and I've seen it done by a dozen or so companies, and they sit there and they shoot the gun, bang, 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 grab another gun and compare it. And they compare compensated pistols to each other with standard loads and in front of a fucking board, and then they use a slow-mo iPhone and they try to draw little lines on it showing how high it rose, and it's fucking bullshit. It's fucking bullshit. It's not scientific. It's not a measurable experience or it's not a measurable result on how a compensator actually fucking does. Now, I understand people can feel things differently and say, okay, yeah, that feels different. Or you watch someone who does shoot a lot and you see how they handle a firearm compared to another firearm. But that's always fucking pissed me off. So I went to school for mechanics.
So I was sorry. I'll let you finish your thought.
I was gonna say I'm surprised no one's actually done it the legitimate way. So when I went to school, I did I used to really want a Subaru WRX. It was like, for me, when I was a poor little kid, I was like, that's my dream car, rally car, cool. And so what I saw some of the rally cars, they have like a diffuser across the back of the windshield, top of the windshield, because there's that huge step and that pressure drop behind it. Mm-hmm. So we had a wind tunnel in college, and we had a load cell system that had like a sprue coming up, and we had like a little NASCAR thing, and I made a stick-on diffuser, and I moved it up and down the NASCAR to see where the pressure drops were and where the diffuser worked the best to reduce the amount of drag on the vehicle. And it turns out putting diffusers in front of the windshield on a NASCAR profile actually reduced drag. So the drag, oh my God, I got something in my eye. Anyway, goddamn ported guns. So
that's what it was. Someone shot a ported gun somewhere, and it just got in your eye.
Oh, fuck you, whoever you are. So there's a load cell, right? So it's like a giant aluminum ring across the top, and then a shaft went down the middle, and there are all these collars that went to it that had like little screwed in pieces to kind of set tension. And then along the outside of the ring were little load cells. So if you guys don't know what a load cell is, it's a positive and negative, and then there's like a couple little brass or copper strands that cross, and they zigzag, and as there's deflection, they measure deflection. So there was like 4 of those on top, and there was like multi-layered. So anytime you pushed on this model of a car up top, it would measure, the downward pressure, the side to side, essentially roll, pitch, and yaw. I don't know if you like satellite shit, right? So satellites can roll, pitch, and yaw. So it measures all of that. And I was like, getting into guns, I was like, man, does anyone actually do something like that? Do they actually have a load cell device to put the gun in, and as the gun is fired, and something that squeezes the trigger this way, like a clamp, not like pulling a string, but like an actual device that squeezes it from backstrap to trigger, so there's no extra load from pulling on it, and actually measuring what that does, because that would probably be your number one best way to measure and compare things, but no one's done that from what I can see.
Well, and that's not going to sell any compensators is the thing. You know what I mean? So everyone does these videos because, you see it in the comments. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's so flat. Like it just looks, it's incredible, because, and I hesitate to say this because it sounds like I'm insulting, 90% of the industry or customer base, but most of the guys, they see the bright, shiny thing and they're like, oh, that looks so cool, I got to have it. And I see it specifically with a few companies that like, I look at it and, I kind of cringe when I look at it because I'm like, there's not any real purpose behind it. It's just all Gucci flair on the end of your gun to look cool, and it's not really doing you anything. But I told you I'm kind of the live and let live guy, so I'm not going to go out and name those companies or talk bad about them or anything like that. Like, hey, that's fine. You do you. You're selling them. People are buying them. People want them. That's capitalism. You know what I mean? If people want it. And so, I mean, and there, then it rolls into, and I'm sure a lot of people have had this conversation where you've got, where you're talking about having a customer that wants something that, like the way they want it isn't right, but they want it. So you're going to do it that way because that's what they want. And they've convinced themselves that that's what they want. And it's like, all right, fine, I'll do it for you like this, and I try to do my best normally to, with customers when I talk to them to be like, hey, okay, you said you wanted this, but why? Right. What's the reasoning behind this? And let me see if I can't steer you in the right direction, to the best of my ability. And I don't know anything. I don't know anything, but I don't know everything. I'm not by no means a into the road, my word is final expert. Most of the things I've learned have been self-taught through experimentation and things like that, and figuring out for me what worked best. And so I've even been guilty of doing the side-by-side video comparisons of the slow-mo stuff to see, to measure a difference. But again, it's that video that kind of sells the product, because that gets people interested. But when I actually go and have a conversation about it, it's like, okay, well, that video is only telling part of the story. And mostly what guys neglect is to talk about, and you even see it in some of those videos where you'll see the gun shoots and it comes up so far and comes back down, and then you see the compensated one and it shoots and it doesn't come back up as far. But sometimes you'll see it come down further than where it started, and people don't catch on to that. And that's a big part of it is return to zero, because that's, at the end of the day, what matters the most is having a gun that properly returns to zero. Right. It really doesn't matter how high it comes if it returns to zero correctly every time. Right. And a lot of guys miss that point. They just want the gun that comes up as little as possible, even if sometimes it's actually coming up and driving itself further. Right. But it's like I said, it's that thing that, it's the, not to say the sex sells, but it's the flatness sells. You know what I mean? It's the cool looking video of like, oh, my gun barely recoils. Right. So.
No, but that's such a great point, though. Return to zero. So I have a 1986 Mac 11, and I put a Lage upper on it, and you shoot it side by side with my MP5, and it has more visible dot travel, right? If your toes are pointing at the target and you're set up and you're nice and tight behind the machine gun. Hey, don't make noise. My dog's in here. And you're behind the gun, you run that gun, and it's and it's heavier bolt, huge bolt mass compared to my MP5.
Oh yeah. Yep.
But its return to zero is fantastic. The second that bolt clunks forward, that dot drops right where you left it. And just because it has a higher recoiling impulse system, like you said, the return to zero works. Or you grab one of our SLR, we have a SLR 104 at the shop, 545 AK. That compensator at the end of that gun, and the way that gun was built, it actually has negative recoil. You actually are bringing the gun back up to zero. You're never actually recoiling up and back. It's actually always kind of going down. So it's more of like a supportive shooting, where you're actually like trying to force it up more while you shoot. And that's and people don't realize that about that gun and that cartridge, and how the cadence of that gun and how it actually recoils is so different from like an AR. So return to zero, that's a really good point that people probably haven't really thought of.
Well, I mean, and look at a Glock 18. Yeah, look at a Glock 18. You look at a video of a Glock 18 and somebody that knows how to hold and shoot a Glock 18, it returns to the same spot every time. I mean, it's going like that, but it's coming back to the same spot every single time. So, and that's a balance of slide weight combined with the round that you're using, the recoil spring weight that you're using, and the shooter. Because you can get one shooter with the exact setup that works perfect for them, and then you can get another guy that holds the gun differently and it doesn't return to zero quite correctly for them. So, I mean, there's like, it's this rabbit hole that you just keep going further and further and further down. You're like, okay, I got it figured out. This is the perfect setup. And that's what you talked about, having recipes. You go out and you find a recipe online for this perfect thing. Well, it's perfect for that guy that came up with it.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's perfect for you, so, and that's another thing that you got to constantly try and, get people to realize is like, hey, and that kind of rolls me back towards, the guys that were, that talk about stock Glocks, versus modified Glocks. And you got the crowd that's like, the only reliable Glock is a stock Glock. And as soon as you start modifying them, well, that's because your gun doesn't work, is because you modified it. Yeah. And it's like, well, he's correct in saying the gun doesn't work because you modified it, but it's not because it was modified. It's because it was modified incorrectly. Right. Because And Glocks have this reputation is you punch 3 pins out, or 2 pins, depending on the model, the whole gun falls apart, and you just swap parts out, and everybody's a gunsmith, and everybody's an armorer. And they got their little armorer certification that they went and took, and they got their little certificate up on the wall, and so they know everything that there is to know about the gun. And it's kind of done the Glock community a disservice in the fact that there's very few real gunsmiths in the Glock realm that actually are doing things for a reason, that understand why, okay, you modified this thing and now the gun doesn't work. Okay, but the reason why, like I talked about, why the why behind it, and I mean, stacking tolerances is a thing. Having out of tolerance and out of spec parts is a thing. And so there's you can modify a Glock and keep it reliable if you do it the correct way with the correct parts and the correct formula for what your intended purpose of the modification is.
Right. I kind of brought up the load cell thing just because I was trying to get Jay to like, hey Jay, when you're done with suppressors and you're finally bored of sound, can you do this for everyone so everyone can stop doing a dick showing contest on whose compensators are better? Because it really is. It's like, it comes down to the shooter, it comes down to the model of the gun. If you're shooting a P320 with a compensator and then you switch over to a P10 and say, oh, well, look at these two guns, this gun recoils less. Maybe the shooter's grip is just better on that other gun, and when they do the Tony Cowden reverse, horseshoe clamp grip and they drive that gun out, the guns it just fits their hands better. It fits their...
Oh, entirely. I mean, I've got a buddy of mine, Chris Howard, that... if I could get him to do all of my compensator recoil videos, I would get him to do it, because he's like 6'4" and 260 pounds, and he guy's a fucking brick wall, and just a regular, I built in a carry optics Gen 5 G17, not ported, not comp, anything, and the thing just looks like a laser beam in his hands, because he's just got an iron grip. He knows the proper technique of how to grip the gun on top of being a giant, and so the gun just doesn't move in his hands. So he'll make anything look like it's just the best possible thing out there. Like, oh my god, I have to have it. It needs a little asterisk at the bottom. Your results may vary. So,
and that's really how it is. Your results may vary, and. Excuse me. I just had some really spicy ramen. So you might get higher pressure loads, and some higher pressure loads, even if they're advertised similarly, might have different results with a compensated system across the board. And then the person's grip, is the grip changing through the course of fire? I find myself readjusting grip after shooting shot strings or whatever. So it's just fuck. That's why I'm like, man, someone build a goddamn load cell that actually collects data properly and then sells it as a service. Because then,
who did actually do a very scientific test was, and there goes my brain again. Fire for Effect.
Oh, okay.
He did, and shit, I even have a hard time finding it now. Because he did this years and years and years ago. But he did an actual scientific test, which, only showed it isolated one variable, and that was muzzle rise. There was no capacity to measure return to zero, because he did it in a ransom rest.
Right.
But it's the only ransom rest tested compensator series that I've seen. Because that's really the best way to do it. If you're comparing that singular variable of rise, that's how it needs to be done, is in a ransom rest. But most shops aren't going to go out and drop $1,000 on a ransom rest and then take the time to do all the video and everything on it, because they're not interested in those results. They're interested in it looks cool on video, and everybody on the internet's going to go, it's so flat,
Right.
So, but he did. What he did? I think he did like an SJC comp and one of the old school KKM comps. And like 2 or 3 others, and so he had actual measurable, verifiable scientific data of, okay, this one rose X%, this one rose X%, this one rose X%. He also did a really interesting barrel accuracy video or excuse not video, but test, where they actually, and they did it, it really opens your eyes when you read it and gets you to understand that there are variables that need to be considered, because they did it in a barrel fixture. So they had the actual mechanical accuracy of the barrel itself.
Oh, okay.
And then they did it again with the barrel installed in the slide. And so you actually had some barrels that were more accurate on their own, but then actually less accurate when installed in the slide. So like you had barrel A that was like barrel A shot a 1-inch group. I'm just throwing this out there, but barrel A shot a 1-inch group in the barrel fixture,
right,
and barrel B shot a 2-inch group in the barrel fixture. But then when they were in the slide, barrel A that shot the 1-inch in the fixture shot a 3-inch in the slide, and barrel B shot a 1.5-inch in the slide. So it's
right.
like, it's, so, and that's, you get all these guys that are talking about, barrel companies that are like, oh, we sell a match grade Glock barrel. And, it's kind of a joke. Well, not a joke, but I think it's funny because it's like, we sell a match grade Glock barrel that's drop in fit. And I'm like, match grade, drop in fit. Those two things don't go together. You know what I mean? Like, right. If you really got a match grade barrel, it shouldn't just drop into the gun. So I mean, there's so much misinformation, and just it's advertising. It's what 90% of it boils down to. It's advertising trying to solve problems.
It's like, what is the definition of match grade? What is the plus or minus tolerancing that defines it as match grade? I mean, I bought a couple barrels. I forget what the company was called. I bought a couple drop-in barrels for my P10, and they didn't fit. And it said on the back of the packaging, if it doesn't fit, you have to send us your gun and we'll fit it for you. And it was like, why is it a drop-in barrel? That's probably the closest to match grade that I've ever get, where you actually have to send it back and get fitted for it, which would make sense if you're actually trying to fit it to the gun.
100%. But obviously, well, I mean, like you said, what's the standard for match grade? So I wonder how many people even actually have so here, let's say it like this. What would you say is an acceptable accuracy standard for an AAR in 2021?
Oh, that's such a fucking hard question to answer. what
I mean, me personally, with the quality of barrel manufacturing that we have nowadays, and how many companies will advertise a sub MOA barrel capability, for me personally, I would say I think a general industry standard or accuracy standard that most people could probably accept is 1 inch or better at 100 yards. I think is a pretty good standard.
Yeah, I think so too.
If your gun will group 1 inch or less at 100 yards, you're good to go. Like
for an AR, yes.
For an AR, right? So
with good ammo though, let's emphasize there. Yeah, you need to shoot good ammo. You can't just get PMC fucking 55 grain and expect to do that. It's
correct. Yes. I don't think any industry standard exists for pistols in the industry or in the and when I say industry, I don't mean Glock as a manufacturer. I mean industry as far as the conglomerate of shops out there that do work on guns and all of that, or the clientele, the customer base, the shooters. I don't know if anybody actually talks about a acceptable standard of accuracy, mechanical standard of accuracy for a pistol. I mean, I think I'd probably personally consider it. I think a pistol should be able mechanically to shoot 2 inches or less mechanically at 25 yards, which isn't that. I mean, you got guys that build bullseye pistols, like Joe Chambers builds bullseye 1911s custom. These are $4,000, $8,000, $10,000 1911s. And his guns will shoot an inch at 50 yards. Which is for a pistol is outstanding. You know what I mean? So so that means his gun should easily be able to do a half inch at 25 yards. But that's a world class pistol. So for me, I'm like, if the gun will do 2 inches or less at 25 yards, I think that's the standard. But I wonder. This is even something I haven't even thought about until right now, but I wonder how many people even have any idea of what they would consider an acceptable standard mechanically for a pistol at 25 yards. So
that's a really good question. I know that CZ.
I mean, had you ever considered it?
No, I haven't thought of it to that degree. Like I've thought about it. So like CZ will put like a paper, like certain guns from CZ, they'll give you the zero paperwork with the gun when it arrives. So they'll do like a 3 or 5 shot zero on the gun, and, through the iron sights, and then literally you can zero it for you. You can open that paper and go, oh shit, I need to do, you know, 1 click and, you know, elevation up 1 over 2, you know, to get a 50-yard perfect bullseye on their gun. So they do paper them and they do group them and they measure the group and they have, you know, the all the information on that paper, which is kind of nice. They do that for their rifles. They do that for their sub guns. I can't remember if they do it for their higher end pistols. They might. But I always was like, oh, that's kind of nice. It passed the factory standard for that barrel, right?
Yes.
So, and most people don't even know what the factory standards are for a Glock. Glock doesn't. I don't know if Glock advertises it in their manual what the factory standard is for a zero on their or for.
I'm not aware of one, and I'm sure the individual manufacturers have their standards.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So when I say the industry, like I said, I'm more talking about like
a person who bought a gun.
You and I, anybody.
So that would be interesting to actually get the factory and the factory standards, compare those across the board. I mean, for me, I don't even paper my guns half the time. I use a laser light bore sighter, zero my optic to that laser light. I go out and I'll shoot. I'll paper them, but I'm not like bagging them. You know, I'm not like.
Oh, So I came from much more of the rifle world. I did some TRS for a very short period of time. I never got serious about it, but I'm 2 blocks away from Zermont Arms, if you're familiar with who they are.
Yeah.
Real good friends of mine. They build amazing bolt action receivers. World class. So I've been around the PRS community a ton, and coming from the military and the rifle world and all of that, I've always been super anal about getting a good zero on a firearm. Rifle, it's like, I need to know exactly where this gun is zero. And I mean, there's a billion zero techniques. You know, guys that are like point aim, point of impact at 100. You got your 5200. You got your 25 300 meter. You know, all these different zeros out there. Ton of different opinions and all that. You know, so it kind of blows my mind that moving into the pistol world, and this is something that actually the law enforcement or the tactical crowd, I think, actually does better than the USPSA crowd when it comes to pistol shooting. Is most of the USPSA guys that I know that run a dot on their gun are super sloppy about zeroing their dot on their gun. They're like, you know, they'll shoot it offhand at 7 or 10 yards, you know, and they'll be like, it's about right. And they're called good. And I'm just like, that just blows my mind. I'm like, man, like if I'm zeroing an optic on anything, it's going to be on bags out of known distance. I'm going to do it until I know it's perfect, because then I remove the gun from the equation. Right. When I miss, it's me. You know, and so, I mean, yeah, and you even get a billion different, you know, opinions about what distance to zero, you know, a pistol at, you know? Right. So it's another thing that just kind of blows my mind. So.
Yeah, I mean, I mag floor plate. I'll put a floor plate on, you know, a tabletop and shoot, you know, and I'll paper it. And if I'm hitting a 1-inch bullseye, personally, if I'm hitting a 1-inch bullseye on a 5-shot group at 15 yards, I'm happy with my pistols.
At 15?
Yeah, I usually do 15. I know a lot of people that do 25 for their pistols. At that distance, I mean...
And I mean, 1 inch at 15 very easily is inside of 2 inches at 25. Very
easy, you know, and
so that's, you know, that's where I'm curious what kind of everyone's mechanical accuracy standard is for handguns, because I hear it all the time. Guys are like, well, I can't shoot better than the pistol can shoot, so I'm not worried about how accurate it is. You hear that argument pop up all the time, and guys talk about match grade barrels. You got the crowd that's on the other hand, they're like, just leave it stock because you can't outshoot the pistol anyways. And there's a lot of people that can't outshoot the pistol because there's some guns out there that just aren't very accurate guns.
Right. So. Right. And, you know, and then at 50 yards, I've got some IPSC steel out there. And if I'm plugging my headshots and I'm hitting that 4-inch box at 50 yards with my dot bagged, or not bagged, or sitting on a bag or resting on a...
Yeah, resting, yeah.
I'm like, okay, cool, good enough for me. And then rifles is different. Like it's a CQB rifle, and I'm just gonna run 55 grain and beat the shit out of it in like short range classes. I'm not too worried about shooting like a super hard zero with 77 grain OTMs because I know I'm just gonna run piss through it. But I have a 16-inch SPR that I built that I put 77 grain Black Hills OTMs through it, and it's holding a 1/3 inch group at 100 yards, and I'm like, that's fucking stellar, hell yeah, with a Night Force ATACR F1 1-8, and then you put 55 grain through it, and it's a 4-inch group at 100 yards, and you're like,
yeah,
great training ammo, sick. I do zero the guns that I want to be super precise. Obviously my carry guns I try to zero as great as possible, and then I put a lot of rounds through them on bullseye targets at known distances to see where those rounds start dropping off for me, so I know that what I'm comfortable doing with that pistol. But yeah, I will admit there's a lot of times where we'll go shoot a video for something, and I'm just going to stick the laser light bore sight in at 25 yards in our shop. It's in a gun vise, and it's aiming at the wall. Drop the dot on it, take it to the range, shoot a bullseye. Oh, I'm within 2 inches at 15 or 20 yards. I'm going to shoot this video. I'm not going to carry that gun. I'm not going to be like, this gun's good enough to fucking end a dude's life. But I'll shoot the video.
For its purpose, it's fine, 100%. So, yeah.
Or like a lot of people ask, if I don't have a laser bore sight, or what's a quick way? Well, do you have backup iron sights that you can co-witness? Sometimes like the Glocks, when I first got into Glocks, I would get the Trijicon suppressor height sights. I would like lollipop it, and it would get me really, really close. And then I would
You're one of the only other people I've heard say lollipop. I say that too.
Yeah, lollipop or apple on a post or split the apple or whatever.
Pumpkin on a post is what I just taught. Pumpkin on a post.
Nice. So, and that would work more because I remember I was like really big into the dual illuminated stuff when they first came out, because I was like, fuck batteries. Now I'm like,
oh, those are awful.
At the time though, I was like, fuck batteries, and now I'm like, now it's fucking terrible. And then you get into the people that I'm like, are you running an auto dimmer on your optic? Oh yeah, it conserves battery when it's in my pants. Cool. That's not the adult thing to do. This is your carry gun, you have a light on it and it's dark out, so if your auto dim is on, are you going to be able to see your dot when you flash white light? No. So I try to coach people like, okay, if you actually are taking carrying a gun at night seriously, that dot better be glowing like the fucking sun if you plan on using a light. There's so many factors that people don't really pay attention to. Kind of the reason why we do this podcast is to kind of shed light on a lot of the nuances that go through people like yourself and myself's brains, like what we actually are trying to process on a daily basis, and at least put out the information to the best of our ability to the listeners. Like, okay, we can't answer all your questions. You're going to have to figure a lot out yourself. But if you listen to this podcast, it might turn a bunch of people on to want to go out and hit the range, bag their gun, test some different loads, test their target loads versus like their carry loads, and maybe actually learn something about the gun they fucking carry every day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, dude, I can't count how many countless hours I've spent staring at a part or a gun or something, like when something's not working correctly. And I'm just like, why? What is wrong with you? Why aren't you working how I want you to work? And just going through every single piece and part on it, like trying to figure out like what's the cause of this issue that I have. And a lot of people, they get, they have an issue like that and then they just write it off. Like, okay, well, compensators, like they're like, oh, well, I put a compensator on my gun and, that's literally all I did. I took a stock gun, I put a threaded barrel in it, I put a compensator on it, and I went and shot, and it stovepipe every round. Oh, compensators are stupid. Well, let's look longer and harder at this and figure out, and that's where some people quit. But for me, that's where that's kind of what motivates me is like,
right.
Okay, well, why isn't this working? How can I fix this problem? What can I do to make this work? Because I see someone over here has got it working. Well, how? It's not magic, like, so.
How many rounds? Is it I think Faxon makes a lot of barrels for people. I think what's the place out of Florida that cuts barrels for everyone? you know, a lot of these barrels, like you said, is it a drop-in match grade, or you know, a lot of these barrels and these compensator setups too, there's also a break-in process for things like it's
for sure. Well,
and super sticky when you, or the new barrel is super sticky in your gun. You got to run the fuck out of it. You got to basically wear out it's like a breaking in a car. You like, don't go beat the shit out of your brand new BMW, you know, 335xi that's turbocharged. Like, let the cylinders break in. There's all kinds of machine marks that need to fill in. And or same thing with like shooting PRS. Like, a lot of people have a recipe for barrel break in. My recipe for barrel break-in that's worked for me for PRS is put 250 rounds to the gun and then fucking clean it. And I didn't at the time, I didn't do copper fouling removal. It sped up by 150 feet per second. Like, oh, it did what I wanted it to do. Cool.
Yeah.
But there's other people that are like, you didn't break your barrel in with 3-shot groups for 12 fucking hours while doing copper fouling removal.
Dude, I'm sure you could start a 4-hour-long conversation on barrel break-in, just because I know that community a little bit, and yeah, that's one of those hot button topics that's like everyone's got a different opinion on barrel break-in and how to do it and what's right and what's wrong, and if it's even a real thing, like, you know, so like, yeah, it's yep, I get that 100%.
I'm hitting a 6-inch plate at 1,000 yards with no wind. I'm happy. Fuck off.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and so then even moving past break in is also wear out. I mean, people don't understand that, like, there are wearable items, like you know, the idea that you're going to buy a Glock 17 and that it's going to last you a lifetime. Well, the major components of it are going to last you a lifetime depending on your shooting schedule. But I know of people that can wear a Glock out to the point that they're wearing the slide out because they're cracking slides from, you know, high volume round count. I mean, these guys are, you know, shooting 100,000 rounds a year, you know, and most people aren't going to shoot 10,000 rounds in the lifetime of their pistol.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, you know, like recoil springs, man, they wear out. And that's like, for some people, that's a foreign idea. Like, hey, yeah, no, you should replace your recoil spring, you know, depending on its pound rate and, you know, the construction of it, you know, anywhere from some wear out as quick as 2,000 rounds to others can maybe last you 10,000 rounds. You know what I mean? Like, there's a ton out there. So
yeah, that happened with me. I have a CZ 75 SPO tactical that Cajun Gunworks built, and somewhere around the 20,000 round mark, my recoil spring decided to not do its job as well. And I'm like, oh, why is it trickling rounds out? And fucking, oh yeah, recoil spring. Yeah, that's probably why I put a new recoil spring in. You know,
it comes back to life and you're like, it's amazing.
It works again. I don't need an extractor. It's just the recoil spring, you know, and those are those things that you get to that point, you problem solve, and you're like, oh shit. You know, like when the gun from the factory with the hammer back and you do one of those air racks that all that fat that went through. It's like, that's not good if your gun does that most of the time. Like, okay, maybe like the STI. Maybe the STIs and stuff, like a broken in staccato or something like that. They're really soft recoil spring assembly and the lockup's really nice on them. But when you can just pick up your gun and just like, you're like, no, that's not good. No, it's fucking hammered to death. Yeah, and then I put my 14-pound recoil spring back in, and I was like, oh, it shoots again, yay! Or
I mean, dude, I had a pistol that literally, I mean, it was pretty amazing. It would go from I had a maintenance schedule on that gun that if it got dry and dirty enough that it would literally, from one magazine to the next, it would go from running perfectly to it would be like, nope, I quit. I'm too dry and dirty. And the next magazine, all of a sudden, half the rounds would malfunction. And I'm like, what the hell? You wipe it down, throw some oil on it, comes straight back to life.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's a matter of getting to know your guns that well. It's like that's something I talk about, like, is knowing your gun inside and out, because building race guns, especially, especially the shotguns, is a thing that, like, I send a letter with all the guns that I build. And one of the first things it says in the letter on the shotgun is like this: you have to be an expert in this firearm if you want to have good results in it. You need to know everything there is to know about this gun, its maintenance, where it likes to be oiled, what parts wear out, if you have this issue, what issue it is, and why you have this issue. Like, you've got to be an expert. And that's not to say that you have to be an expert in every gun out there, but if you have a gun, be an expert in that gun. Learn that gun, what it likes, what it doesn't like. You know, it's like
Right.
it's like the guy that's got the, you know, the car that nobody can start the car except for him because he knows just how to hold the throttle and just the right order to like click the key to like get that thing to fire up. You know what I mean? It's like you gotta know your gun that way. So
in that you just, what a great perspective. Okay, so we talk a little shit here, but it doesn't matter. They're not a company anymore. Hudson. Okay. I bought a Hudson H9. I was sold on the aesthetics, the look, the feel. It was probably the most comfortable gun I've ever shot. Like in my hands, felt great. When I got that gun bagged was a 8 to 10 inch group at 25 yards.
Holy crap.
Bagged. I have a video of it. And you get the guys on YouTube. Well, that's not how you bag a handgun. Bro, the receiver was touching a sandbag. Okay? It's not like I'm resting the barrel of a PRS gun on a bag accidentally. Like, it's bagged. Everything about the gun's fucking bagged. 8 to 10 inch group. Then they had a red Loctited recoil spring assembly that you could tighten from the front, but it would back itself out. There was no like capture spring or anything in there, or Jesus clip. People know what those are. There's no Jesus clip or anything in there to retain the system. So over time that backed out. So I had to break apart inside the receiver, inside the dust cover, and lock my gun up, you know? And then I had to like do a lot to get it the fuck apart. And I sent the video over to them, and I was like, I sent the photos of the paper. And I'm like, this gun, I just can't get it to fucking group. I don't know what the fuck's going on. I've tried different ammos. It does the same with 115s, 124s, 147s from all these different manufacturers. Like, I went through the fucking motions with this gun. And there was like some nuance that I remember there. Oh, well, the engineers tested it. They never sent that gun out for actual, like, I hate to say like influencer shit, but there are people out there that put fucking shit tons of rounds through a gun that are going to give you an honest opinion about the fucking gun and be like, yeah, I put 5,000 rounds through it and I was having malfunctions every other mag. And this is what I saw. And a lot of companies, they didn't do that. They were like, oh, well, our engineers tested it. Well, here's the problem with fucking engineers. Engineers are the ones that built it. They know this little nuance that, like you said, the guy that can start his car, he's the only one that can start it. That's a fucking problem with engineers. I'm an engineer. I know this is a problem because it's like, oh, well, we made it this way. And if you don't do it this way, then it doesn't fucking work. Well, 99% of everyone's going to do it the other fucking way. So, and that's
yeah, I was just going to say, I was just going to say that information is kind of valuable as far as, like you said, you're going to do it this way, but Joe Bob over here is going to do it his way. And right. It may not even occur to you how Joe Bob's going to do it. So you didn't even enter that in as a variable. So for you, it's like, it never fails. It never fails. Almost every single thing that I've put out there, at some point, I got some data back from someone that did something with it that I didn't intend them to do. That, like, I learned this new thing. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, I wasn't expecting someone to do that with this thing. And now I know that that's a variable that needs to be considered. And now I can take that into account. And, you know, and I see it from both sides because that's a thing that you can kind of what if to death. I mean, as far as like how much testing is enough testing, you know, I'm kind of firmly convinced at this point that it doesn't matter how much testing you do on your side, on your end, once something goes out into the public space, you're going to learn something new, like right. Every time. You know, no matter how much you prepare for it. And part of it's the way that you handle those things when those issues come across.
Yeah.
You know, so, but yeah, it's, you definitely want to remove as much of that nuance and as much of that, you know, holding your tongue just right, you know, while you do the thing to make it work as possible. You want as little of that as possible.
Yeah. Oh, and the other part was the lockup on the slide and the frame, where the rails run. There was like a weird little like feature there, and it was part of the lockup. And mine was raw metal, like the coating was gone in 1,000 rounds, and it was just like pulver. It looked like peened metal, and you're just like, oh, is it supposed to look like this too? And they're like, oh no, no. But then they backpedaled. Oh, the engineers say that's normal. Well, your engineers are either fucking stupid because they designed something that
See, that's just
it's an excuse.
Yeah,
it's an excuse.
That was a cop out. That was a cop out. I got a barrel from I got a slide from a company with all the nonsense going on right now. You know, getting blank slides of a high quality has been difficult.
Right.
You know, I mean, Lone Wolf was kind of the industry standard for slide blanks. And even they had their QC issues that, you know, I know what to watch out for on them. But so I was experimenting with a couple different companies, and there was one that came across. And I was like, all right, so I bought one of theirs, and they had machined the inside surface of the. Here, hold on, I'll make this easy to see. They had machined the inside surface here. So basically in here, this was machined too deep so that when you put a barrel in the slide, the barrel hood actually sat up above the slide.
Oh.
And so what that does is when you install the slide on the frame, there's a gap now between the locking lug on the barrel and the top of the locking block. So the barrel can sit there and do this inside the gun, which is not good for mechanical accuracy when the barrel's not actually locked in place. And so I sent them an email about it, and it was the same thing. It was like, oh, well, our machinist says that's normal. And I'm like, your machinist is an idiot, and no, that's not normal. Like, that's a fucking excuse because you don't want to give me a refund on your crappy subpar product. So, you know, that's something, man, especially as a small company, you gotta, when you fuck something up, you gotta take responsibility for it, and you gotta make it right. I mean, if you want to survive as a small company, and I mean, I've screwed up plenty of things, you know, and I've always tried to do the best to, like, hey, if I can make it right, I'll do my best to do that. So,
right.
And I mean, most of it is people just don't want to take responsibility. If they could pass blame on to something else, they'll do that most times. So.
Absolutely. Speaking of like barrels staying mechanically static, I did notice I have a couple 320s. When I start pulling the trigger, the back of the slide tips down into like the gap, like to tip.
Yep. You could get that on a Glock too. That's just for slide to frame fit. So.
Yeah, I know.
But that's not helping your mechanical accuracy at all.
No, I did notice that with the SIGs, their fire control units. It's sheet metal, right? So I worked in sheet metal for a long time. Sheet metal, you have a press brake, and the part that goes into the bend is the part that wears out the most in terms of like life cycle and bend operation. And at some point, that tool needs to be changed so that the radius in the bend of the sheet metal maintains the correct tolerance spec, so that what it's fitting into doesn't fall out of spec. And I wouldn't be surprised if, as towards the end of that tool's lifespan, you know, radiuses start, you know, not being as tight as they need to be, the flange coming off of that bend starting to have a little bit of deflection after the press brake operation or whatever it might be, you start to get some sloppiness in there. Because I've got 320s that are like super tight, and as you squeeze that trigger, there's no rearward movement in the back of the slide. And then my buddy, he's probably got 20,000 rounds, 30,000 rounds through his. The second you start touching his trigger, it looks like a dump truck in the back, you know? Yeah. And I'm like, that's not good, dude. You might want to go talk to them and have that checked. And he's like, yeah, it's definitely not as accurate as it used to be. And I'm like, okay. So, and so like, I understand there's like that aspect of it's cool. It's a drop-in fire control unit, but at the end of the day, it's also sheet metal. So I'm also a big fan of like machined rails, not sheet metal rails.
I mean, that goes back to what's your acceptable standard of accuracy.
Yeah.
Will the gun still hold 2 inches at 25 yards? Cool. All right. You know, like, is it 3 inches at 25 yards now? Is it 4 inches at 25 yards? Is 4 inches at 25 yards still enough to fucking point shoot somebody at 7 yards or closer for a concealed carry gun? it's still good. It's still minute of man, if you want to call it that. You know what I mean? Like, it all boils back down to what's that acceptable thing. Because you got guys that, you get the guys that are like the $600, Tupperware plastic fantastic block is all they ever need, and they would never understand why somebody would pay $4,000 or $6,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 for a custom hand fit, hand built 1911, 2011, whatever. But for them, they don't need that gun that the slide and the frame rails are so perfectly fit and the barrel fit is, so well done, that the gun is a sub 1 inch gun at 50 yards. They don't need it. They don't want it. They don't care about it. You know what I mean? So it's again, that thing of, but yeah, I've seen that where you pull the trigger. I've seen it on a Glock where you pull the trigger and you watch the back of the slide go whoop, and you're like, oh,
yeah.
That's not good. So
yeah. Well, you know what, dude? I enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. I know you're a busy man. I was in the one-man shop position at one time. Your shotguns look beautiful, by the way. I was checking them out on your website.
Thank
really,
you.
really nice, high-end race shotguns, right? That's kind of like a bread and butter for you there.
Yeah, it's not the primary focus, but it's definitely one of the stronger secondary focuses. That was something I got into because I had some experience with another brand out there that I was less than satisfied with. And then it turned into, well, shit, I could probably do it as good myself. So I built one for myself and then had some people ask me to build them for them. So I started building for other people, and it kind of snowballed from there. That's the shotguns are an exercise in frustration because they are that gun that there's so much nuance and so much to know about them that, they're, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's, the shotguns are such a FUD gun. And I'm like, yeah, but really the shotguns can do a lot. There's such a wide variety of ammunition and setup available that, they're more customizable than most platforms out there as far as their general purpose and use. You know what I mean? Like, I'd almost argue that a shotgun would be one of the better into the world guns than a pistol or a well set up AR. Just because of the wide variety of use. I mean, your AR, can you go hunt birds, small game, big game, and people with it?
Nope.
Not effectively. You know what I mean? So, it's kind of, they're a deep dive. So for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we can do shotguns next time if you're ever down to do this again. I will dig into shotguns. Shotguns are fun for me.
I am down to talk about shotguns.
High brass, low brass,
slugs, buckshot, birdshot. There's so much.
The Ariable ballistics at 20 gauge is the best gauge. A 28 gauge, sorry, is the best gauge. And how they measure it. The measuring shot strings. People don't even know that, like, shot string length.
The length
and how tight it stays over length. So if you're shooting at a bird and you're leading it too far, if you have a long shot string length to it and it's tight enough, that bird's going to essentially
flies through it. Yeah.
Through it rather than a flurry of, the phrase flurry of buckshot.
Choke selection, all that stuff.
I'm friends with Carlson down in Kansas, Carlson Gun Tube. So I've been there, and they do all their patterning down there and stuff like that. And there was another company that I think they were using like an X-ray to like shoot an X-ray of the shot strings going through the air and measuring the actual.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's like a snapshot of the shot string in like almost like a 360 where you can actually measure it from all the different angles. I forgot who was doing that, but that was really cool too. So like for people listening, my challenge is whoever's listening, if you're an engineer and you want to start a business, create a load cell that's a fixed load cell. So the gun does not recoil back in the load cell like a ransom rest. It actually, if you did actually keep the gun fixed in this load cell, any downward deflection of the gun too, like the mass of the gun dipping down or pressures from a compensator forcing it down would also be measurable. So anyone out there that wants to get a business, start a consulting company for measuring effectiveness of different guns, compensators, and accessories for those guns to reduce recoil. Even recoil spring assemblies, you could test those as well and see how they work, and then for different loads. So
there's a ton of different variables that need to be tested.
So I want someone to do this though, so that they can compare everyone else's companies products against their shit, against other products, and start building those recipes similar to like what Jay's doing with Pew Science. It'd be cool if someone did with compensators. Because like Jorge and I were talking, I was like, yeah, someone needs to fucking do this. And he's like, you gotta talk to David. Like, but you're after talking to you, you're the I don't. It's all you're like me. You're at that point where it's like I don't fucking care. Like whatever you like to do, just fucking do it. I don't care. But at the same part, like part of me is like, well, here's an awesome opportunity for someone to actually do it the right way and actually build a business around it. So there's
actually put some real legitimate data into the industry instead of just he said, she said nonsense. That is what so much of the information that we go on is.
Exactly. So
just the idea that it's funny to me, the idea that like people think that compensated carry guns is a new idea. Like, dude, this shit's been around since the 60s and 70s. Go look at some of the old school 1911 builders that were building single chamber comps on commander size 1911s back in the 70s as carry guns, and your mind will be blown that it's like, oh shit, all those thuds that we make fun of for their 1911s and their 2 World War gun, they've done everything you've done on your Glock. Like, they were the first ones to run electric optical sights on their guns. Like, it's none of it's new, man. None of it's new. You think it's so. It's just it's got an ebb and a flow, and everything in the industry comes full circle. It's cool for 5 minutes, and then it's out of style, and it comes back around, and it's cool again. So.
Yeah, dude, I built a hand fit 1911. It was my second gun I ever bought. This was 12 years ago now, and I put a single port compensator on it when I got it and carried that gun. That was before KKM and the Roland Special and all that shit. I wanted that extra length and that a little bit of compensation there. But so there's a business idea for somebody. Actually come up with a load cell that can compare recoil springs, compensators, comp guns, whatever. And then I think you got onto something. What is your acceptable accuracy for your pistol at what distance?
Mechanical accuracy.
Your mechanical accuracy
of the gun.
What is your acceptable? Holy fuck, my brain! I got COVID brain.
Acceptable. I like that word.
Acceptable. Well, my buddy says rectical instead of reticle. That shit gets so fucked up in my head. So yeah, what is your acceptable mechanical zero of a pistol at 25 yards? That hopefully people listening, this becomes a trend. I'm going to start asking people whenever people ask me dumb shit now. It's like, well, what's your acceptable mechanical, grouping of a pistol at 25 yards? And
I'd be willing to bet most people don't have.
It's going to blow mine. So start using that, dude. Start using that on social media. I'm gonna start using it. I want to see where it goes, and we can regroup next time when we talk about shotguns to see where the fuck that phrase, that question has taken customers.
Yeah, man, I'd be happy to talk to you about shotguns and steel frame Glocks.
Cool. Fuck so. Yeah. All right, man. Well, that's a wrap on episode 20 of the ANR Design Unholstered podcast. We had David, DC Precision. Check out his website. It'll be in the handle, in the product fucking description of the video. My brain stopped working today. I gotta like take a nap or something.
COVID. It's all COVID's fault.
Blame everything on COVID, dude. It's the only way to do it.
It's the easy out for everything nowadays.
Hell yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much. I appreciate you chatting with me. It was very nice meeting you.
Yeah, same thing, man. Appreciate it.